A couple of years.
I'll see you guys in the dark.
Years ago, I dated this guy named Joey. I had just gotten out of a relationship a few months earlier with a guy because of lack of interest with each other. We had just gotten bored with it. I don't know. When you're 21, you don't make good choices most of the time. Anywho, I met Joey on Facebook, and after 2 days of texting each other, he can basically describe me down to my freaking favorite type of socks. He was always really good at figuring people out. Joey was a bigger guy, the kind of guy you see in movies who start the bar fights. I was drawn in and enjoyed his company. He was like a teddy bear to me, rough on the outside, but sweeter than sweet on the inside. We saw each other for a few weeks, going on dates and having a really great time. I learned that he was a tattoo artist, and he was a divorced dad of 2. He told me his ex was crazy and wouldn't let him see the kids because of the bad breakup. Joey asked me to move in with him on week 4. I was love-struck by how nice he was. He had the best stories and would keep me entertained and distracted even in my worst mood. It was rushed to me, but I was in the moment and I agreed. So a week later, I moved all my things into his house. Joey lived with his mother and father. He took care of them with the money he made as a tattoo artist. His mother had a bad leg and worked at a laundromat under the table, so she would get her government check. Everything seemed great that first week. Like I found a guy who really understood my oddness and could make me smile. It wasn't until the second week I started noticing small changes in his attitude. Joey would only go to work when I did. I worked at a grocery store and worked night shifts, so I thought nothing of it at first. He said he was great at his job, and people made appointments to fit his needs so he could work like that. So I never had a moment when I got off work that he wasn't there. He was always there with me. Soon it became a habit at night for him to beg me to lay on his chest and run my fingers through his chest hair. I thought it was sweet at first, until he got upset with me the moment I seemed tired of it. It got to a point where he could make me stay on his chest until he fell asleep. I felt like maybe I had been a bad girlfriend by not wanting to indulge him, so I didn't press the matter. Joey started dropping me off and picking me up from work. He would spend the last 20 minutes of my shift bagging groceries and making conversation with everyone. Everyone loved Joey. He was just so smooth with words, you couldn't help but enjoy the conversations. People thought it was romantic of him to want to be with me. I thought it was nice at first. Then I got aggravated when he downright refused to let me drive myself to work. 3 weeks into our relationship, living together, Joey made it clear he wanted me to delete every picture I had of my ex. Of any boy on my computer. In fact, he wanted me to delete my Facebook altogether. Even delete all the men from my phone and not talk to any of them at all. Most of my friends are male. I've always had a hard time getting along with girls, and the only girl I do hang out with is a butch lesbian. His reasoning was that I love you so much, I don't want you talking to anyone else. Why would you? I felt like this is probably what ruined my last relationship, so I tried it. I kept conversations with males to a very minimum. My only friends who would ever come over were Sarah and Nathan. A week passes, and Joey starts to question my friendship with Sarah. It's become quite clear to him that we are sneaking around his back and making out the 2 minutes we're not in the same room as him. I'm obviously a cheating, lying scumbag for doing so. The fights start at this point. The constant accusations and no trust from him at all. Now at this point, I should have left. Heck, I should have never went in the first place. He was just too smooth about it all. I never had to cook, clean, or anything. When I got off work, he had dinner already made. He had a bowl packed, a movie we'd like to watch, and an ear to hear my problems with. He seemed like such a great guy. I felt ungrateful for feeling like he was trying to keep me locked away. It was a mind fuck. 4 months pass, and my life is a bird stuck in a cage. I never go out anymore. Sarah hardly visits for fear of Joey's eyes. Things don't add up at all. All these things I thought I knew about him start to seem more like a lie every single day. Whenever I get even 5 minutes alone with Joey's mom, I would try to hint at what I was worried about, but she always backed up everything he said. I can't talk to anyone on my phone now. 3 messages or more, and that qualified as a conversation, and that wasn't allowed. I was in fear now. His small threats of dominance loomed over me, hinted at what he would do if I tried to leave him. I was scared to sleep most nights, and ended up staring at his chest moving. Sometimes I would start a fight to see if I could make him not want me anymore. I would scream and cry and just be a bitch to get out of the house. But he always used his words against me, making me feel weak. Something that I've never allowed. I still don't know why I was such a coward to him. Sure, he was twice my size, an ex-MMA fighter, and had a temper. But my mother trained me to be a bitch with a baseball bat under my truck seat. Never be afraid. I couldn't overcome that fear of what if he hurts me. One night, a local band I like is playing at a bar. I asked Joey if we can go, and he astonishingly says he'd love to. We go, and by surprise, a big group of my friends I haven't seen in 4 months had decided to go too. I tried not to make it too obvious that I'm happy to see them. I don't want Joey to push them away. I always stay a bit distant, but try to talk to them as much as possible at the same time. We ended up leaving after only an hour of being there. Joey didn't want me talking to Todd, my old best friend. Even though he was gay, Joey wasn't convinced though. The next day, Todd calls me and asks me to hang out for a couple of hours and see his new apartment. I ask Joey if it's okay. His expression is complete shock. Why would I want to go see a man without him? I can't help but break. Please, let me go see him. Joey looks at me as if I'm pathetic. He says, "You can go, but your shit will be on the porch when you get back." Thank God. If that's the case, I'll take my stuff right now. The look on his face won't leave my mind. He wouldn't let me touch any of my things, and he packs the car for me. I say I'm sorry, and he says, "No, you're not," and slams the door on me. I hear things breaking inside, and I just go. Days later, I have to get my tax refund from his house. His mother called me and told me it was there, and that she wouldn't say I was there if I walked in and got what I needed. She knows what I went through with him. I found out later that Joey had threatened his mother to back up whatever story he told me, that he had hit his wife, and that's why she really left. He never had a job. He never left the house. He took his mother's government check as well. I never saw his face again after I left, but he still sends me messages on Facebook. Always a new profile when I block him, asking me to come back and that he is so sorry. It took me about half a year to get to sleep. I don't know if I could ever see him again without breaking down. He looms over me in my dreams sometimes. I think about what if I didn't get out. Sometimes the right guy can be so wrong.
It was June of 2015 when I met Tyler. I had just turned 20, and my parents were going through some nasty divorce stuff. So to be said, I was having some issues. It wasn't long before Tyler had wrapped me around his finger. Within the first couple of months of knowing him, I started to see red flags. My mom and sister didn't like him at all, and neither did any of my friends. He was very jealous and insecure. It started off with him telling me what I should and shouldn't be wearing, to bringing up my issues and using them against me. Anyways, around December of 2015, Tyler started to log into my social media accounts and was pretending to be me. He would message guys I knew and flirt with them, and message my best friend trying to start unnecessary drama. Obviously, I found out about it and confronted him. His excuse was that he was bored and wanted to see what they would say, and thought it was funny. Who does that? Well, I told Tyler to stop, and if he didn't, then I wasn't going to keep being in a relationship with him. Shocker, he didn't stop. Anyways, it only took me a couple of months later to finally break up with this nut job. Because of the person I am, I still was trying to be nice to him. Bad idea on my part. Unfortunately, I led him on to thinking he had a chance to get back with me. He really didn't. I told him over the phone that we would never get back together, which made him freak out. He started threatening me, saying things like, "You'll regret this," or "Watch your back, bitch." I cut all contact with him after that. Well, at least until March 28, 2016. The day I'll never forget. It was 6:45 in the morning, and I was walking out the door of my house to leave for work. My driveway is about 1/10 of a mile long, and on each side of the driveway was trees lining it. So one way in and one way out. It's dark outside, and I'm driving down the driveway, and guess who's blocking me in? Tyler. I'm getting agitated now. He gets out of his car and walks to mine. I roll down my window enough to where he can hear me, tell him to get and beat it. I have to get to work. For about 5 minutes of bickering back and forth, he finally says, "Okay, just give me one last kiss, and I'll leave you alone." Feeling like I'm all out of options, I cave in and say fine. Well, as I kiss him goodbye, he unlocks my door, since my window was down now, and opens my car door. He is standing in between the door and me. Now it's obvious he isn't leaving. He proceeded to tell me that I was going to text my boss and tell him that I'm not coming into work today. Then after I was to text my boss that we were going in his car and leaving this place for good. Yeah, not happening. Since I wasn't going to do any of that, Tyler reaches over and tries to grab my phone from me. Now we're out of the car, wrestling for my phone. I punched him in the face, and he lets go of my phone. I'm crying, begging him to just go and leave me alone. This is the part where he goes and says, "I really hate to do this," and pulls out a gun that was tucked in his back part of his pants. My adrenaline is pumping, and my brain is going about 1,000 miles per second. I'm trying to stay cool and walk back to my car. I'm now sitting in the driver's seat with Tyler standing in between the door and I again. I asked him, "What the hell are you doing?" as he is waving the pistol all around. He tells me he doesn't know and that he is sorry. He slipped up and told me the gun wasn't loaded, so I took this as an opportunity to get the hell out. While he's standing there, I put my car in reverse and gunned it. He stumbled back enough for me to be able to shut and lock my door. Since it's light outside now, I can see that there's just enough room for me to drive my car into a ditch and hope to make it out. I never prayed so hard for my life. I put my car back in drive and floored it. I made it onto the road and see Tyler running to his car. He is now gaining speed behind me and goes around and speeds off. Now would be the time to call 911, right? Well, I was too out of it to think about that. I get to work and immediately go to tell my boss what happened. I ended up calling my mom, and she called 911 for me. I leave work and go home and talk to the officers. I ended up taking out warrants for his arrest. He was charged and arrested with trespassing, assault on a female, and assault with pointing a gun. I also got a restraining order. Unfortunately, it doesn't end here. Now it's around May of 2016. I started to see him follow me while I'm driving to and from work. There was nothing I could do since it was a public road. This was going on for about 3 weeks. I had enough of it. One afternoon, my sister was in the car with me, as I was going to take her to her apartment. Well, here comes Tyler in his stupid white car behind me, so I had my sister videotape him, and I called 911. I ended up in a Walmart parking lot and got him arrested. He spent the night in jail for breaking the restraining order. Had to go to court against him, and ended up just settling for him to do community service and take anger management classes. Thankfully, after the night he spent in jail, he has left me alone since. Tyler has a new girlfriend now, so thankfully, I'm old news. What scares me the most is that I didn't even know him for a whole year, and all this happens. So, crazy stalker ex-boyfriend, let's not meet again. Ever.
In college, I got into a relationship with a guy. He was fine until he found Jesus. He quickly went crazy, claiming demons spoke to him, trying to buy weapons from some shady friends he had, fantasizing about how he would hurt people, and becoming incredibly controlling and physically abusive. Needless to say, I got out of there after a few threats and some really crazy behaviors. He left me alone for a while, and I thought that was that. I was heading to my dorm after a meeting one night when I decided to pass it and go to the student union, which was right down the street, to get some ice cream. As I passed the dorm, I heard steps behind me. I turned around, and I thought I saw someone in a white shirt duck behind a big signboard. I kept walking, listening very carefully. I heard something move and whipped around again. There, a person his size, staring at me behind a tree. I couldn't see very well, but it really looked like him. I was mildly freaked out by then, but just walked a little bit faster. I'd hear the occasional footsteps and breathing behind me, but I didn't dare to stop or let on that I knew someone, probably him, was there. I knew he owned a gun. It would likely put a bullet into me given the chance, because he was that psycho and upset that I dared to break up with him. I walked all the way to the Union and got some ice cream and just sat there in the store eating, unwilling to go back out into the unlit street in case it was my crazy ex. I still hadn't mustered the nerve to head back when my phone buzzed. My heart just fell out of my chest when I saw the message. It was some of my friends, a sweet couple. They'd been walking way behind me when they saw something that alarmed them enough to text me. "Your ex is walking around the street." They called me before I could even text them back. "Where are you? Your ex is prowling around here near your dorm. He was coming back from the direction of the Union. I think he had a gun. Was he with you? What's going on?" Panicked, I assured them that I had not been with him, but someone who looked like him had been following me, and I was at the Union and was too scared to go back alone. They practically yelled at me to stay there and not go anywhere, and that they were coming my way. A few minutes later, they came running into the Union breathless, eyes wide, asking me why he was at my dorm and what had happened. This was possibly what scared me the most. The boyfriend, who is a black belt in karate and is never scared, looked absolutely terrified. He was coiled into some kind of fighting stance and looking around wildly, afraid that my ex would appear with his gun. They told me they were taking me back to my dorm and calling the cops. They sandwiched me between them, and we walked back to my dorm as quickly as we dared, the boyfriend walking in front and yelling into the darkness that my ex better not try anything. I let the two of them into my dorm, and we went up to my room, where my roommates put in a frantic phone call to the police. As we peeked out the window facing the streets inside of the dorm, there he was, lurking in the trees to the side of the dorm, looking up. A streetlight reflected something in his hand, something shiny. I saw him tug at the .22 I realized he was carrying and look up. We locked eyes, and I saw something kind of like rage in his eyes that froze me. In that moment, I knew he really was out to end me and my friends, and I had foiled him this time. He quickly turned and ran away through the trees. We didn't know whether he would come back and try to break in or something, so we called the police again, and lo and behold, sirens within minutes, and officers with guns drawn combing the area. They caught him a few hours later, still with the .22 in his hand. He confessed he was indeed going to hurt us if he had the chance, but he didn't want to take the pot shots at me with my friends there. Apparently, since I'd broken up with him, I was given over to Satan, and it was his duty to make sure I died and went to hell. Of course, he went to jail, and later to a mental hospital, and I moved out of that dorm a week later. I just couldn't live with the thought that he would break out. I just couldn't live with the thought that he would break out and come after me again. I got some cop friends to keep an eye on my roommates until they could move out too. I was never really the same after all of this. I was so afraid and paranoid for years. Now, I can be out and about without any fear, but I still have nightmares about him staring at me through the trees, gun in hand, and rage in his eyes. I'm a 16-year-old girl, and this happened to me last year, only a few weeks after I turned 15. For some background, my sister is 3 years older than me, so this took place when she had only been around 18. She had been dating her boyfriend on and off for about 2 years. We'll name him Steven. Just so you know, my parents are divorced, so I lived with my mom, my sister, and my older brother. We had our house renovated instead of moving out when the house got cramped. You see, the layout is that there is a very small bedroom my brother has, a medium bedroom my mom has, and a large bedroom me and my sister shared. Well, as we got older, we obviously wanted our own space, so my mom had a wall built between the large room and the two smaller rooms. The only problem was that you'd have to walk through one room to get to the other. At first, I had the room that would have to be walked through by my sister, so she was able to get to her room. So, my sister is dating this guy who's the same age as our dad. Stephen also had a daughter the same age as my sister. This guy was a terrible influence on my sister. She stopped going to school, went to raves, and was introduced to drugs and all of that, and all at the hands of her boyfriend. Her boyfriend was very well known in our small village as only a few years back he had a huge drug raid at his old home. He used to also get into a lot of fights, big ones. He almost ended a guy in just a fist fight. He was also well known to be furiously beating his girlfriends. So no surprise, neither of my parents approved of him. This caused my sister to move and live with him in, as ridiculous as it sounds, his tent out in a wooded area. You see, he was living there because he became homeless. So against my mom's better judgment, she invited him to live at our house just so she'd be able to know how her daughter was doing. I'm a very reserved person and shy, especially around people I do not know, and he was very different. Obviously, I had to walk through my room to get to my sister's, and I always assumed my unease and uncomfortableness was due to not knowing him. Fast track a few weeks. By the time my sister turned 17, she found out she was pregnant. She's thrilled, but Stephen is not. My mom was disappointed my sister had gotten pregnant so young, but was happy to support her. One day, my mom finds my sister distraught, and she tells my mom that Stephen wants her to abort the baby and had forced her to take a pill which would start the process. As bad as it sounds, I didn't really zone into whatever was going on. At the time, I didn't realize I was slowly sinking into depression. Fast forward a few months, and my sister and the boyfriend decide to keep the baby. She had a growing belly while my depression worsened. At one point, I decided to try and tell my mom how I felt. She ended up sobbing and blaming herself, which only made me feel absolutely awful. Safe to say, I didn't try to tell her ever again. As the months go by, things start to get a little weird. I'd walk up in the night and find Stephen just sort of standing in my room. As soon as he was caught, he would either rush into my sister's room or out of mine and go downstairs. As uncomfortable as it made me, I didn't bother to bring it up to my mom. We weren't on the best of terms as I'd stopped going to school regularly until I was just not going anymore. The majority of the time, I would just spend in our shower room. Other strange things was the inappropriate comments on what I'd wear. I'm a well-figured girl, even from a young age, so the comments were normal from boys at my school, but it was weird coming from my sister's boyfriend. Not to mention how much older he was. There was one particular item of clothing he had liked for a silk nightgown that was a little above the knee and had a small plunge in the neckline. As you know, I'm a reserved person, so showing my body makes me very uncomfortable. But I liked this night dress because of its softness, so I did wear it a lot, but that was before I noticed his attitude towards it. To start, he simply said, "I like the night dress." I chose to just ignore him, but then he started to say, "I like the way you look in that," or "I like when you wear that." I was creeped out and just stopped wearing anything revealing around him, in fact. I went unbothered by him for a while. Then my sister had the baby, and me and her swapped rooms as mine was slightly bigger than hers. Me and my mom were constantly arguing, well, more of her belittling me and making me feel worse than I already did. So when my nephew was born on my birthday, I spent my birthday alone the whole day, simply crying in my room. I hated living there and wanted to be anywhere else. A few weeks passed, and my mom's and my own anger reached a boiling point, and we exploded into an extremely awful shout match. I still don't know why, but Stephen decided to get involved and also began to disrespect me. At some point, my sister pulled my mom down the stairs to try and calm her down and left me upstairs with Stephen. He left my room, and I assumed he went downstairs. I was wrong. He had actually decided to shut my sister's door, come back into my room, and then shut my door. This is where things hit the fan. Stephen completely blows up in my face. This terrifying 6-foot-something muscular man towering over my 5'4" small frame as he shouts things that genuinely left me terrified. It gives me the shacks just recalling it. He screams in my face how if I was his daughter and I was acting like this, then he'd lock me in a room with nothing but a mattress, and I would only receive 1 meal a day. He continued to go on and on about how disgusting and disrespectful I was. I was on the verge of a panic attack. I swear I blacked out for a few seconds out of fear, which caused me to fall into my bed. He was so angry that he was physically holding himself back to not throw a punch at me. I could see it in his face. He wanted to hit me badly. He would pull his arm back as if to throw a punch, but then stop when his fist came close to my face. I thought he was going to beat me black and blue, like he was yelling in my face that he would. But the most disturbing part of this situation, the one thing that I think he said I won't be able to forget, was when he hissed quietly in my face that I deserved to be beaten, and even worse. After that, he walked out, and I sobbed against my bedroom door, terrified he would come back and keep to that promise. The next morning was a school day, and Stephen decided I needed a wake-up call at 6 a.m. and came into my room, picked me up while I was still asleep, and then dropped me. I woke up terrified and in pain. He then crouched down to be face to face with me and said if I didn't go to school, then he'd do a lot worse than that to me. He went back to my sister in her room, told her what he did, and they both laughed about it while I was crying in the next room. I went to school that day, not even bothering to retrieve my lunch from my mom. Once I was at school, I go straight to my favorite teacher and proceeded to have a complete mental breakdown. I explained what had happened and how I was too afraid to go home. Social services was called along with my mom. My mom told me the minute she found out what happened, she demanded that Stephen take his stuff and leave. After the incident, I was not allowed to go out on my own because Stephen had been threatening to kill me and set our house on fire as well. He had even attacked my older brother who had gotten stitches after having his eyebrows split open. Our house had to have a red alert on it, so if we called the police, they would come straight away. After about a month or so, it went quiet, and we didn't hear from Stephen, and I was glad for that. Then I was informed that Stephen had been arrested. The reason? He had touched one of his old exes, one that lived in the same village as me, and he was being jailed for 8 years minimum. It scared me to think that when he said I deserved to be that way, he wasn't saying it to scare me. So psycho ex-boyfriend of my sister, let's never meet again. In high school, I was awkward and shy. My family said I was a late bloomer since I got my first kiss at 17, completely on accident. And I didn't have my first boyfriend until I was 19. So my boyfriend, we'll call him K, was a boy I knew from high school. We weren't really friends. We just ran in the same group, but we met at a Halloween party a few years after high school, and we just kind of hit it off. At the beginning of our relationship, we spent a lot of time together. Neither of us had jobs, and I wasn't in school, and he was taking a semester off. While I was sending job applications left and right It didn't bother me that he wouldn't do the same because he worked at a camp during the summer, so he technically had a job. I didn't notice at the time because I was too busy being caught up in the idea of having my first boyfriend, but he was emotionally and mentally abusive. I have this weird thing about feet. I just can't stand them. If someone even just nudges my leg with their bare foot, I flip out. Kay knew this, and one time, by accident, he touched my leg with his foot. He must have thought it was funny because then he proceeded to put his foot really close to my face. I ended up cowering in a corner with a pillow over my face, recovering from a panic attack he had just given me. He didn't realize either. He laughed off the whole thing. Also, I tend to be a little bit gullible, but I hate feeling stupid, and he knew both of these. So in private, he would mention things to me. Little throwaway facts that I wouldn't really think about. Then later, while discussing the same subject with friends, I would bring up the little tidbit he told me, and while my friends would tell me I was wrong, he would lash out. God, how you can be so stupid. Why would you even believe something like that? You are embarrassing to me. This is so dumb. And I would too be embarrassed to admit he told me this. The worst was probably our sex life. Now I won't give too much detail, but he was my first, and way more experienced than I was. The first time it happened, there was a lot of pressuring and begging, and it finally happened when he told me he loved me. Being a young girl who had never had this kind of affection, I accepted it with open arms. He would constantly tell me how bad I was and how terrible it was for him. He didn't consider the fact that he was more experienced than me. He just assumed I wasn't trying. He also told me it annoyed him that I would not make noise and that I would just be quiet. I wish I could tell you I came to my senses and broke it off, but sadly this is not the case. He broke it off with me 2 days before my birthday. We had already agreed to hang out on my birthday, and he kept telling me all day how he missed me and still wanted to be with me. But then a week later, he dropped off the face of the planet. He wouldn't text me back, and he wouldn't answer when I called. I later found out it was because he had a new girlfriend. I wonder if he still would have strung me along if he didn't start dating the new girl. Even though it's 3 years later, and I am happily involved with someone else, Kay, let's not meet again. My brother met his girlfriend a year ago when he was 17, and she was 16 at the time. For a little while, they seemed like they had a great relationship. My brother, Alan, and Jamie were always happy together, and Jamie made a real effort to get to know the rest of the family. However, I noticed something was off whenever my brother wanted to go out with his friends without Jamie, and she would have a complete meltdown, screaming about how he didn't love her, and how much she does for him. This happened all the time, so eventually he started spending more time with her to avoid a conflict. She even got annoyed at my mother's funeral because he wasn't paying enough attention to her. Like, what the hell? Our mom just passed. Chill out. Things started to get worse with her accusing him of hitting her whenever he would try to deflect her from punching him in the face. My brother has some mild anxiety problems, and quilt about our mother's death. Since they weren't on the best of terms before she went, he uses Xanax bars to try to self-medicate, which she knows, and often would pick fights with him to use his actions against him later on, or try to tell the school he was on something to get him in trouble when he didn't want to have anything to do with her. Eventually, Alan couldn't take it anymore and ended the relationship a few days ago. A quick note. Our glass back sliding door is pretty weak. If you yank on it hard enough, you can force it open despite it being locked, unless we put a key in it. The other day, she showed up at 5 in the morning, banging on the door and demanding to be let in. My dad got after her, and she left. This morning, however, she broke in through the back door and got into bed with my brother, who slept through all of this. My dad found her and told her to leave, or he'd call the police on her. This afternoon, I heard my brother and his friend get back in from school. All was well, until once again Jamie broke in through the back door, as she had taken the key this morning. Alan's friend stopped her from going into this room, and I told her to leave and not come back, or I was going to call the police. After she had left, my dad came back with 3 new keys made for the back door. My brother showed us her claims of cutting herself, which he reversed imaged and found it immediately, along with the fact that she didn't have any cuts on her arms. It's gotten so bad that my brother doesn't want to go to school since she follows him around and tries to get him to talk to her. And when that doesn't happen, she gets him in trouble. Jamie, I hope you get out of our lives and get the help you desperately need. I was a late bloomer and got my first boyfriend at the age of 20. I was a senior in college. I am very shy and anxious, so I was thrilled to finally have a boyfriend. He seemed wonderful at first. He complimented me constantly, surprised me with flowers, the whole 9 yards. Red flags started popping up, but he was so nice, otherwise I tried to ignore them. He said he loved me after only 2 weeks, and pressured me to say the same. He'd become depressed and angry if I declined his invitation to hang out or had other plans. When we'd fight, we'd become more and more frequent at each time. He'd convince me I was to blame or overreacting, and then when we made up, would go on and on about his love for me and how much he did for me. As a child of a narcissistic parent, I would recognize how wrong this was only in retrospect. A full year went by. Things got worse and worse. If I suggested breaking up, he'd have an utter meltdown. He'd sometimes throw up, he'd cry, beg, plead, and alternately insult me and call me a heartless bitch. Then he'd take his insults back and say I had just upset him. Finally, I got the courage to really end things. He was enraged. He refused to leave my apartment. He screamed at me, cried, threw his phone and smashed it, and ripped the covers off of my bed. Finally, I basically pushed him out of the door and locked it. He then sent me over 60 emails, texts, and phone calls. I blocked him everywhere I could. Now comes the terrifying part. The next day, I heard the doorbell ring and knew it was him. So I stayed very quiet in bed and didn't open the door. Eventually, he rang it so much that the landlords who lived below me confronted him. Horrified, I listened through the door and heard him tell them I was expecting him and must be asleep, and they just let him in. I rushed and locked the thin door that separated me from the stairs up to my living room from the main entrance. He knew I was inside, though, because that door is never locked. He pounded and banged on the door for almost an hour, alternately swearing at me and pleading with me. Finally, I called the police. They were very skeptical and basically told me I was overdramatic. But they told him not to come back again. It sufficiently scared him. I could have pressed charges, but did not, as I just wanted it all to be over with and didn't want to incur his wrath. Anyway, I have fully blocked him on all channels and moved apartments. But he did manage to contact me, begging me to be forgiven, accusing me of abusiveness, and then enraged, insulting me grievously. In therapy, I learned he likely had borderline personality disorder, which means he has a pathological fear of rejection. These people are irrational and even dangerous. "10 years ago, I dated this guy, David. I don't talk much about David, only to my current partner and very close friends. Talking about him makes me very nervous. When David and I met, I was only 17, and he was a post-secondary student in his early 20s. Being a near-homeless gay teenage dropout with raging hormones, a complicated home life, and limited dating prospects, I jumped into a relationship with him. Our relationship progressed very rapidly, and I moved into his Toronto apartment after only a month of dating. I was young and inexperienced with relationships. David was a horrible guy, of course. In the beginning, it was great. We were in love, very much so. But after a few months, that began to change. One night, after our first minor fight over laundry, I got a glimpse of how angry he could get over a simple matter. That night, I had a problem in which he held a pillow against my face, smothering me until I was asphyxiated. His facial expressions contorted in terrifying ways, morphing into the face of a demon. In hindsight, this dream was trying to tell me something. I should have trusted my instincts. 6 months into our relationship, he no longer hid these parts of himself. See, David was bipolar disorder and ignored his diagnosis. In retrospect, I can confidently say he is a sociopath as well. As a teenager, I was not equipped to deal with this. He was incredibly manipulative, eventually keeping me away from my friends and family, especially male coworkers. He stole money from me and put his bills and debts in my name without my consent. I still have terrible credit because of it. He would gaslight me on the strangest things, trying to convince me I was a horrible person. He constantly accused me of cheating, almost daily by the end. He would fly off the handle suddenly. He was often physically violent as well. I can't exactly remember how long I continued in this relationship. As it is part of my life, I try hard to forget. But it was around 2 years ago, maybe a little bit more. On my first attempt to leave him, he followed me as I left during the night. I passed through a well-lit city park on my way to a friend's place. Before I knew it, I was on the ground with David on top of me, hands around my throat. Thankfully, a passerby came by to aid me. Don't ask me why I didn't report him for any of this. I was very confused. I really thought he was going to end me. I didn't tell anyone about that night for years after. He attacked me once more shortly after I left him. When he bumped into each other at a party, I found out later that he had been cheating on me the entire time we were together with multiple people, including my best friend's straight boyfriend. Go figure, right? Fast forward a few years, I'm dating an awesome guy, who I'm still with today actually, and I'm working as a charity fundraiser, collecting donations for nonprofit on a busy Toronto street. I get angry for strange emails and texts from David once in a while, always changing my phone number and email address when he finds them out. I never respond. I'm informed that he moved to Montreal. I spot him a few times a year stalking me, poking his head in and out from behind a street corner while I'm working, through my windows as he walks around my neighborhood trying to figure out which house I live in, or around my work office building. It made me very anxious every time. Every so often, he tries to infiltrate whatever group of friends I can connect me to. I see him pop up in social media photos with friends I have recently hung out with, despite living in a different city. I don't know how he's finding out these things about my personal life. However, all of this slows down as time goes on until a year or so passes with no sign of him. Until I get an email last year saying that he wants to talk, briefly, about things that happened in our relationship. It's worded straightforward, not like the rants that he used to send me, and I wonder if he wants to apologize to me. I don't respond, but I message a mutual friend whom I trust to find out who he is staying with and how he was doing. My best friend warns me that he still obsesses about me often, and that his mental health has declined, and they are no longer close friends because of it. He advises me never to speak to him again, for both of our sake. Out of morbid curiosity, I set up a fake Facebook account and creep his profile, sending me into a rabbit hole of links onto his Tumblr page and beyond. He is an artist now. I find a post with photos of one of his latest works, the creepiest freaking zine I've ever seen. It depicted an extremely bloody scenario and a poem. I don't remember the poem exactly, but it was something about gruesomely murdering a boy who didn't love him back, describing the death in detail and contending that he deserved it. I'm more than a little uneasy at this point. I'm actually pretty scared. 6-ish years is more than enough time to get over your ex. This was just obsession to an alarming level. I changed my email once more and asked our mutual friend to keep me updated if he ever decides to take a trip to my city. I also deleted my Facebook and most of my social media accounts, and I haven't seen any sign of him in over a year. I'm 27 now. I've worked through a lot of the issues that David left inside of me. Now I have a really kick-ass partner and a squishy cat. I'm a university student, and my life has been pretty rad. Still, I'm always expecting to get an email, to see him down the street. I wonder if this is over, or if anything will change if he tracks me down again. Maybe he's simply biding his time. So yeah, let's not meet, stalker ex-boyfriend David, ever again. And if you ever read this, consider it my closure on a trash relationship. And please, do get some help. "10 years ago, I dated this guy, David. I don't talk much about David, only to my current partner and very close friends. Talking about him just makes me nervous. When David and I met, I was only 17, and he was a post-secondary student in his early 20s. Being a near homeless gay teenage dropout with raging hormones, a complicated home life, and limited dating prospects, I jumped into a relationship with him. Our relationship progressed very rapidly, and I moved into his Toronto apartment after only a few months of dating. I was young and inexperienced with relationships. David was a horrible guy. Of course, in the beginning, it was great. We were in love, very much so. But after a few months, that began to change. One night, after our first minor fight over laundry, I got a glimpse of how angry he could get over a simple matter. That night, I had a dream in which he held a pillow against my face, smothering me until I asphyxiated. His facial expressions contorted in terrifying ways, morphing into a face of a demon. In hindsight, this dream was trying to tell me something I should have trusted my instincts. 6 months into our relationship, he no longer hid these parts of himself. See, David was bipolar disorder and ignored his diagnosis. In retrospect, I can confidently say he is a sociopath as well. As a teenager, I was not equipped to deal with this. He was incredibly manipulative, eventually keeping me away from my friends and family, especially male coworkers. He stole my money from me and put his bills and debts in my name without my consent. He would gaslight me on the strangest things, trying to convince me I was a horrible person. He constantly accused me of cheating, almost daily by the end. He would fly off the handle suddenly. He was often physically violent as well. I can't exactly remember how long I continued in this relationship, as it is a part of my life I try to forget, but it was around 2 years, I believe, maybe a little more. On my first attempt to leave him, he followed me as I left during the night. I passed through a well-lit city park on my way to my friend's house. Before I knew it, I was on the ground with David on top of me, hands around my throat. Thankfully, a passerby came by to aid me. Don't ask me why I didn't report him for any of this. I was very confused. I really thought he was going to end me. I didn't tell anyone about that night for years after. He attacked me once more shortly after I left him, when we bumped into each other at a party. I found out later that he had been cheating on me the entire time we were together with multiple people, including my best friend's straight boyfriend. Go figure, right? Fast forward a few years, I'm dating an awesome guy, and I'm working as a charity fundraiser, collecting donations for nonprofits on busy Toronto streets. I get angry for some strange emails and texts from David once in a while. While changing my phone number and email address when he finds them out, I never responded to him. I'm informed that he moved to Montreal. I spot him a few times a year stalking me, poking his head out from behind a street corner while I'm working, through my window as he walks around my neighborhood trying to figure out which house I live in, or around my work office building. It made me very anxious every time he did this. Every so often, he tries to infiltrate whatever group of friends he can connect with to me. I see him pop up in social media photos with friends I have recently hung out with, despite living in a different city. I don't know how he was finding out these things about my personal life. However, all of this slows down as time goes on until a year or so passes with no sign of him. Until I get an email last year saying that he wants to talk briefly about things that happened in our relationship. It's worded straightforwardly, not like the rants he used to send me, and I wonder if he wants to apologize to me. I don't respond, but I message a mutual friend whom I trust to find out how he is doing. My friend warns me that he still is obsessed with me, and that his mental health has declined, and they are no longer close friends because of it. He advises me never to speak to him again, for both of our sake. Out of morbid curiosity, I set up a fake Facebook account and creep his profile, sending me into a rabbit hole of links on his Tumblr and beyond. He is an artist now. I find a post with photos of one of his latest works, the creepiest freaking Zine I've ever seen. It depicted an extremely bloody scenario and a poem. I don't remember the poem exactly, but it was something about gruesomely hurting a boy who didn't love him back, describing the death in detail and contending what he deserved. I am more than a little uneasy at this point. I'm actually pretty scared. 6 years is more than enough time to get over your ex. This was just obsession at an alarming level. I changed my email once more and asked our mutual friend to keep me updated if he ever decided to take a trip to my city. I also deleted my Facebook and most of my social media accounts, and I haven't seen any sign of him in over a year. I'm now 27. I've worked through a lot of the issues that David left inside of me. Now I have a really kick-ass partner and a squishy cat. I'm a university student, and my life has been pretty rad. Still, I'm always expecting to get an email or to see him down the street. I sometimes wonder if this is over, or if anything will change when he tracks me down again. Maybe he's simply biding his time. So yeah, let's not meet, stalker ex-boyfriend David, ever again. And if you ever read this, considering it my closure on a trash relationship, and go get some help. Over a year ago, I started talking to this guy who used to hang out with mutual acquaintances. Without asking friends about his reputation, I jumped into a relationship with him because we got along really well, and he seemed normal. I wasn't incredibly into him, but I enjoyed his company. The first red flag was him telling me he was known to be a pervert in the past. I let it slide because he seemed normal enough, and people change, right? A few days into knowing him, this lesbian woman added me on Instagram. Her account looked fake, but she was incredibly nice, and I'd talk to her on Kick once in a while. She would ask me for nudes. I felt bad after a while because she would tell me sob stories, and I'd give her a lingerie picture, but never any nudes. I started to feel off about her and stopped communication, but she lurked my Instagram and obsessively commented. I eventually blocked her. My now ex-boyfriend and I were starting to cool off during this period because he became very verbally abusive and called me one night screaming, "I hope you end yourself, you stupid cunt. You're lucky I don't do it myself." I calmly told him to never talk to me again, and that if it showed up at my house ever again, I'd have my family members beat him to death or get him arrested immediately. The day after we break up, the girl I blocked came back with a new account and obsessively liked all my pictures. I stalk out her page and look under her friends list. Every person she followed was my ex-boyfriend's ex-girlfriends or girls from his personal Instagram. My ex had made a fake account as a lesbian to talk to me, try to get personal information from me, nudes, etc. I have tried to distance myself as much as possible, but the huge breach in trust still scares me. I then told my friends that he was the guy I was dating,
and got a flood of concern. "You dated that guy? He had a few arrests because he slept with underage girls and attacked them, and we suspected he did more with those girls. Here is the kicker. If I told them who he was from the start, this all would have been avoided because I would have never dated him. He still makes up accounts and likes all my pictures with sad screen names like Not Yours or Lonely Girl.
I had been dating this guy for about a month. I knew him from going to a local gig. I spoke to him a few times before swapping numbers. At first, he seemed like a bit of a nerdy type, a dressed sort, and I used to go for those sorts because I had this self-destructive personality. He told me his friend had committed suicide, and he hadn't been the same since. I felt bad for him, and we started going on dates. I eventually was quite bored of him, but as I didn't have any friends who were into music, I stayed with him for a social aspect where we would get involved and invited to these really cool parties. I had been sleeping with him, and I noticed when I could not be interested in sex, he would keep giving me drinks, and then asking me if I wanted to at least 5 times until he gave up. The more I refused it, the more he seemed to get, let's say, angry at me. This anger is ultimately what I think caused him to drug me. He invited me to this party, and he supplied the alcohol to me. It didn't seem suspicious that he wouldn't drink from the bottle of vodka he gave me, as he said he only wanted to drink cider, and the bottle he gave me was only a fifth full. I drank it like I normally would, but around 30 minutes into the party, things got really weird. I was talking to a girl, and felt like I was coming up on ecstasy, except everything started to glow gold, and felt really in love with this girl. I am the most socially awkward person, even after drinking, so it was really strange to me. I started to see fractals, and then I looked behind me to see him, and then suddenly, I blacked out. I eventually came to consciousness while throwing up at my friend's house down the road from the party. I had no clue how I ended up there. My friend told me what had happened. She said she came to the party, and I could barely walk, and wasn't answering properly. And when I got to her house, I was frothing at the mouth, and took off all my clothes, and started rolling around on the grass. Apparently I was shouting my hallucinations, thinking the trees was made of gold, and my friend's foot was a fox. She said I had gone upstairs to drag myself back and forwards by my ass along her bathroom floor like a dog with fleas. I was overheated and wasn't responding. It really upset me that she hadn't called upon an ambulance or anything. I took a drug test, and my mom was drug testing me at the time, as I was a frequent user and was still living at home. There was nothing on the test. I was confused as hell. I then just dismissed it and thought maybe I got too drunk. It always bothered me in the back of my mind, as I never drank to that extent. I asked my boyfriend, and he says I drank a whole big bottle of vodka, but I had only had a fifth. Now at the time, I really shouldn't have been suspicious of him, but I have Asperger's, so I often be quite naive on these things. Flash forward. I'm going to a festival with my friends. I didn't want to go with him, as I was spending time with my friends. However, he said he was going to the festival with his own set of friends. I told him we could meet up at the festival as a big group for a couple of hours, and then split off in the evening. I am eating pizza at my friend's house, and I got a phone call from my boyfriend saying that he is on our street. I am really confused, and he says his friend can no longer come. I get quite annoyed that he came uninvited, however. I just think that I can stop him from coming around in the evening to my friend's apartment, and get her to say that she has no room for him. We go out with my boyfriend to the festival, and he buys drinks. I have rum, which I share with my friend, and he buys champagne. Weird, but anyway, I see some other friends at the festival, and we were hanging out when he starts saying some weird stuff about how he looks like a school shooter and could hurt someone very easily. But not in a funny way. He makes it sound serious and malicious. We get a horrible feeling, and try to secretly ditch him in some way. But suddenly, he says, "Oh, let's go see my friends who are playing over here." We thought, yes, he has friends here? We can get rid of him there. Though it was strange he said that his friends weren't going to the festival. So he went to see his friends, and they say to him, "We've been looking for you everywhere, dude. Texting and calling, and you haven't responded to us. We were supposed to come together," to which he responds that he was with me. This whole time, I was starting to feel quite woozy and weird, like I had smoked joints, but was only smoking cigarettes that he had pre-rolled as I was too drunk to roll them, and I hadn't been rolling cigarettes for long, so it was pretty terrible anyways. I say to him with my friend that we were going to leave now, and our taxi is waiting on us. With relief, me and my friend dart off to get our taxi home. However, what we didn't know was that he was catching up to us, and he eventually got to us after 2 streets of chasing us and asking if he could come. We said no, to which he kept pushing us, and we just shouted no. However, he waited by us whilst we were waiting for our taxi. And when the taxi came, he just got in, and we were too drunk to know what the local thing was to do. We just said, "I guess you can come for an hour, but you can't stay over." We let him in the apartment, and he spent 2 hours talking to my friend's housemate about how evil I was, and my friend's housemate was really freaked out and told us in secret that she was scared. I told my boyfriend he had to leave now, and he said he wouldn't leave unless I came with him. Kept pushing me to go and stay with him instead, and I kept saying no until he gave in. I opened the door to let him outside, and then quickly slammed the door and locked it. He waited outside for 2 hours until he gave up, and tried spam calling me all night. I broke up with him then. I have since been known as the most insanely high girl ever, and keep having people come up to me telling me about how they saw me at the party with this guy, dragging me around, and my pupils were dilated, and I was going really, really crazy over things. Anyway, I knew it was research chemicals, because he was obsessed with them looking back on it. He would keep talking non-stop about his crazy trips on various weird, unknown drugs. Also, his dad is a chemist. The cigarettes were hash-spiked. Creepy ex-boyfriend. Let's not meet again.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.